My name is Everett, and returning to my late grandmother's house was always a bittersweet journey through memory and time. One room, however, held a particular weight, the once vibrant child's room where my cousin Sophia once played, laughed, and dreamed. As I stepped inside, the faded pastel wallpaper and whimsical prints on the walls whispered of a childhood long past, now shrouded in melancholy and secrets. The room was nearly frozen in time. A lone teddy bear, its fur matted and eyes glassy with age, sat on a dusty windowsill. The small desk by the window, cluttered with brittled papers and long-forgotten crayons, beckoned me with silent urgency. I noticed that the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift subtly as dusk turned to night, a gentle pulsing in the shadows, as if the room itself was alive with hidden sorrows. Unable to resist, I approached the desk and discovered a worn leather diary, its cover delicately embossed with Sophia's name. With trembling fingers, I opened it, revealing pages filled with childish scrawls and cryptic entries. One particular passage sent a chill down my spine. I hear whispers when the stars come out, like little voices sharing secrets. Mama says they're the dreams of the night. The words stirred something deep within me. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the room grew colder, and the soft murmur of the wind outside seemed to blend with faint, indistinct whispers emanating from every corner. I sat on the faded rug, absorbed in the diary, when suddenly I sensed a presence behind me. Slowly, I turned, and there, near the old wardrobe, I glimpsed a tiny, translucent figure, a little girl in an antique dress, her eyes brimming with unspeakable sorrow. For a long, heart-stopping moment, I couldn't move. Then, with a gentle yet haunting voice, the apparition whispered, "Remember me." The sound was so delicate, it could have been the rustle of a curtain, yet it carried an undeniable plea. Instinctively, I spoke into the silence. "Sophia, I'm here. I remember." The response was a soft sigh, and, as if in answer, the music box on a shelf one I had overlooked until now began to play a slow, haunting lullaby. Its melody filled the room with bittersweet echoes of lost innocence and lingering regret. I reached for the music box and opened it, allowing the tune to envelop the space. Every note resonated with the diary's entries, each word now imbued with the gravity of unspoken memories. As the lullaby played, the shadows seemed to dance in gentle patterns across the walls, and the room pulsed with an ethereal light. I could almost feel the weight of Sophia's untold story pressing in around Mia's story of joy, heartbreak, and a deep loneliness that tethered her spirit to this sacred space. With each passing minute, the ghostly whispers grew more distinct, as if the room itself was urging me to uncover the truth behind her sorrow. In that fragile hour, before dawn, the boundary between past and present blurred. I sat, listening intently to the soft, spectral voices, piecing together fragments of a childhood lost and dreams left unfulfilled. The room was not just a relic of bygone days. It was a living memorial to the innocence and pain of a little soul who had been forgotten by time. The diary, the music box, and the fleeting glimpse of Sophia all wove together a narrative of remembrance, a quiet reminder that even in death, love and longing endure. Now, as the first light of day filters through the dusty window, I remain seated in that hallowed space, forever changed by what I experienced. The child's room stands as a bridge between worlds, a testament to the enduring power of memory, the fragility of life, and the whispered echoes of lost dreams that refuse to fade away. My name is Julian, and I recently returned to my ancestral home to sort through the memories of a bygone era. Amidst the dusty corridors and faded photographs, one room, once a vibrant haven of childhood laughter, caught my attention. A long-forgotten child's room that time seemed determined to preserve. The room was untouched, as if waiting for its owner to return. Faded pastel wallpaper adorned the walls, and delicate hand-painted murals of fairies and sunshine still clung to the ceiling. A small bed, draped with a once cheerful quilt, sat in one corner, while a vintage music box rested atop a worn dresser. Despite the room's nostalgic charm, a heavy melancholy permeated the air. That night, as a storm raged outside, I decided to spend a few quiet moments in the room. The only sound was the rhythmic tapping of rain against the window and the distant rumble of thunder. I sat on the edge of the bed, flipping through an old leather-bound diary I discovered tucked beneath a loose floorboard. The diary belonged to a little girl named Eliza, whose innocent scribbles and tender sketches chronicled a life filled with both wonder and inexplicable sorrow. As midnight approached, the room began to change. The soft hum of the music box, long silent, suddenly sprang to life, playing a haunting lullaby that sent shivers down my spine. The shadows on the walls lengthened and danced, as if stirred by unseen hands. In a moment of unsettling clarity, I saw movement in the corner of my Aja, small, translucent figure, standing by the window. Its eyes brimming with a sorrow so profound, it nearly broke my heart. Frozen in terror and compassion, I watched as the ghostly child drifted closer. Her features were delicate, yet marred by a sadness that defied explanation. I could almost feel her longing for Salisa's plea that resonated with every word written in her diary. The air grew colder, and the once familiar room seemed to whisper secrets of a past tragedy. Each creak of the floorboards echoing her silent lament. I gathered my courage and reached out, murmuring softly, "Eliza, I'm here. I want to help." The apparition paused, and for a fleeting moment, the room was filled with a serene stillness. The doll on the shelf, with its cracked porcelain face, seemed to nod in approval, as if acknowledging my promise. I carefully read aloud a passage from her diary that spoke of a lost dream and a yearning for peace. As my voice filled the quiet room, the ghostly presence began to fade, leaving behind an ethereal glow that slowly dissolved into the darkness. The music box's melody softened, and the oppressive sorrow that had gripped the room lifted, replaced by a fragile sense of closure. I realized then that Eliza's spirit had been bound to the room by the weight of her unspoken grief that, once recognized, could finally be released. Now, as I sit here in the restored silence of that child's room, the memory of that surreal encounter remains etched in my mind. The room is no longer just a relic of the past. It has become a sacred space where the boundary between the living and the lost is tenderly acknowledged. Eliza's diary and the lingering traces of her presence serve as a poignant reminder that sometimes the truest act of compassion is to listen to the whispers of forgotten souls and to the quiet, aching heart of a child long gone. My name is Adrian, and one fateful night, I set out alone on my small rowboat on Lake Mirage, seeking solace after a trying week. The lake, a vast mirror of dark water, seemed to invite quiet reflection under the fading twilight. As I rowed steadily away from the shore, the only sound was the gentle splash of my oars, breaking the silence. At first, the calmness of the water brought me peace, but soon an unsettling feeling crept in. The crisp air carried a hint of something metallic, scent I couldn't place. Sand. The water's surface began to distort in peculiar ways. I noticed ripples that formed shapes not born of the wind, and in the reflection of the inky water, a pale, ghostly figure emerged just beneath the surface. My heart raced as I leaned over the boat's edge. For a moment, I thought it was a trick of the light, a stray shadow, or a fleeting ripple, but then I saw it clearly, an indistinct form, its presence both haunting and inexplicably deliberate, as if it were watching me from the depths. I shivered and tried to dismiss the sight as a figment of my stressed mind, yet the unease deepened. Grabbing my flashlight, I swept its beam over the water. The light revealed fleeting silhouettes that moved against the natural current, shapes that defied explanation. With every stroke of my oar, the water seemed to resist, growing strangely viscous. as though some unseen force was determined to pull me deeper into the lake's mysterious grasp. Panic surged through me, and I desperately attempted to steer the boat back toward the shore. However, as I rowed, a thick mist began to roll in, distorting the familiar landscape and amplifying the eerie murmurs that drifted across the water. Soft, sorrowful voices that sent chills down my spine. Each echo felt like a lament from a forgotten soul, lost in the depths of Lake Mirage. Finally, after what felt like an eternity battling both the elements and my rising terror, I managed to land on the bank. The cold, damp ground beneath my feet did little to ease the dread that clung to me. I sat there for a long moment, listening as the mist slowly lifted and the lake returned to its deceptive calm. Yet, the memory of that spectral figure and the unexplainable force that had nearly trapped me on the water remained etched in my mind. Now, as I recount this tale in the safety of daylight, I remain haunted by the night's events. That solitary journey on Lake Mirage taught me that even in moments of isolation, the deep waters can conceal unspeakable mysteries best left undisturbed. My name is Vincent, and on a particularly restless night, I found myself drawn to the quiet isolation of Lake Sable. The full moon hung low over the water, casting silvery ripples across the dark surface as I pushed my small rowboat away from the shore. At first, the gentle lapping of water against the hull soothed me, offering a brief escape from the relentless noise of everyday life. As I rowed deeper into the lake, the distant shoreline faded into a veil of shadows. The only sounds were the soft splash of my oars and the whisper of the cool night breeze through the trees. Yet, an inexplicable chill began to settle over me. The water, usually calm and inviting, now seemed to harbor hidden depths and secrets that stirred in the darkness. Halfway across the lake, I noticed a peculiar glimmer near the water's edge, a faint, shifting light that didn't match the serene reflection of the moon. My curiosity urged me to steer closer, though every instinct screamed caution. As I approached, the light resolved into a series of small, almost imperceptible flickers, like the dying embers of a long-forgotten fire. It was then that I realized the light was emanating from beneath the water, as if something unseen was moving just out of sight. A sudden, subtle ripple disturbed the otherwise glassy surface. I paused, my heart pounding in the silence. In that brief moment, I thought I caught a glimpse of a pale face, distorted by the water, staring back at me with eyes that held an ancient sorrow. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me questioning whether it had been a trick of the light or a spectral visitor from beyond. Determined to uncover the truth behind the eerie phenomenon, I resumed rowing, following the shifting glimmers. With each stroke, the atmosphere grew denser, the air colder. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone. The gentle sounds of nature were now punctuated by an almost imperceptible hum, a soft whisper that seemed to echo my own thoughts. It was as if the lake itself was speaking in a language older than time. I pressed on, and soon the lake's center revealed something startling. An old, weathered rowboat, half submerged and seemingly abandoned, bobbing silently in the water. Its paint was chipped, and the wood bore deep scars of time. What made it truly unsettling was the unmistakable outline of a human figure seated at its stern, a figure that seemed frozen in time. Face turned toward me in a silent plea. A cold dread washed over me. I strained to see more clearly, but the figure's features remained shrouded in shadow and mist. The silence was deafening as I lingered there, caught between the urge to flee and the compulsion to understand the mystery before me. Every instinct told me to return to the safety of the shore, yet something inexplicable rooted me to the spot. Then, as if in answer to my silent questions, a soft voice drifted through the stillness. It wasn't loud, more a murmur of wind against water, yet it carried a profound sorrow. Come, remember. The words, barely audible, sent a shiver down my spine. They resonated with a familiarity that I couldn't place. A forgotten memory, or perhaps a long-lost soul, reaching out from the depths. In that moment, the spectral rowboat and its silent passenger faded into the night, leaving only ripples on the surface of the lake. I sat motionless, my oars resting in my lap, as I struggled to process the experience. The boundaries between the tangible world and the mysterious unknown had blurred, and I was left with the lingering question of whether I had witnessed something truly supernatural. Now, as I steer my rowboat back toward the shore, the image of that abandoned vessel and the faint, mournful whisper remain etched in my mind. Lake Sable has become more than just a body of water, is a keeper of secrets, a silent witness to tales that defy explanation. And every time I pass by under a full moon, I can't help but wonder if the lake will once again reveal its hidden, haunting truths. My name is Quentin, and tonight, I embarked on what I believed would be a quiet, solitary journey across Lake Ashen. The sky was a deep indigo as twilight faded, and the gentle lap of water against my modest rowboat promised a peaceful escape. From the weight of my thoughts, I pushed off from the worn dock and began rowing steadily into the heart of the lake. The water was eerily still, reflecting the star-studded sky like a mirror, and every stroke of my oar echoed in the silence. Yet, as I ventured further, a subtle shift in the atmosphere prickled my skin, a coldness that seemed to seep from the very depths of the water. Halfway across, I noticed an odd disturbance on the surfacer's series of ripples that did not correspond to my wake. I paused, peering into the inky darkness, when I saw it. A pale, indistinct shape drifting just beneath the surface. It moved with a purpose that defied the randomness of natural currents. My heart pounded as a quiet dread took hold. Determined to understand, I adjusted my course toward the source of the disturbance. The shape gradually morphed into something more defined, a shadowy figure whose features were obscured by the murk. It hovered silently, as if observing me, its presence both unnerving and inexplicably sorrowful. I could not tell if it was real or a trick of the light and my overactive imagination. As I drew nearer, the air grew colder, and an almost imperceptible whisper seemed to float over the water, carrying a mournful message that sent chills down my spine. I strained to catch the words, but they were as fleeting as the ripples that danced around my boat. The spectral figure then began to drift away, and with it, the whisper faded into the night, with a mix of trepidation and curiosity. I followed, my oar dipping into water that now felt as if it held centuries of untold stories. The lake, once a source of solace, had transformed into a realm of mystery and quiet terror. Shadows lengthened, and the gentle sound of my rowing became a solitary hymn to the unknown. Eventually, I slowed and allowed the boat to drift, compelled by an inexplicable need to linger in that haunted expanse. I felt the oppressive weight of loneliness and regret in the air, as if the lake itself bore the memories of lost souls and unfulfilled promises. I recalled local legends about Lake Ashen, a place where the boundary between our world and something other lay dangerously thin, where the past reached out to those who dared to row alone under a midnight sky. In that fragile moment, as I floated beneath a canopy of shimmering stars, the spectral figure reappeared. This time, it drew closer, its form emerging like a mirage from the depths. Its eyes, though featureless, seemed to plead silently, an echo of sorrow from a bygone era. I felt a profound connection, as if our destinies were intertwined in this haunting tableau. Then, just as silently as it had come, the figure dissolved into the dark water, leaving me alone with the lapping waves and the whispering wind. I resumed my course back to the dock, the memory of that ghostly encounter etched into my mind, a stark reminder that even in the solitude of a quiet lake, some mysteries are meant to disturb and linger long after the night has passed. Now, as I tie my boat to the dock and the first light of dawn begins to chase away the shadows, I am left with a lingering question. What if the secrets of Lake Ashen are not meant to be understood, but simply witnessed, a silent testament to the true, timeless nature of sorrow and the unknown? Under a twilight sky, I, Marina, clutched my daughter Eliza's small hand as we wandered through the creaking corridors of our time-worn home. The wind outside carried eerie whispers that melded with the house's own sighs, as if the very walls bore the secrets of forgotten sorrows. Eliza's wide, inquisitive eyes reflected both wonder and apprehension. "Mom, do you think the house is alive?" she asked in a hushed tone that betrayed her unease. I offered a gentle smile, though my heart pounded with the weight of memories I had long tried to bury. That night, driven by an inexplicable pull, I led her up the narrow staircase to the attic, a place rumored to cradle the pain of our past. With every step, the wooden boards groaned beneath us, echoing stories of love lost and mistakes made. The attic's door creaked open, revealing a dim space filled with dusty relics and long-forgotten mementos, faded photographs, yellowed letters, and a delicate diary bound in cracked leather. As I flipped through the diary's brittle pages, a sudden chill swept through the room. A soft humming sound began to resonate from the far corner, a melody that stirred both melancholy and an unspoken invitation. My eyes widened as I noticed a pale, spectral figure emerging in the half-light. It was a woman, her expression one of deep, unspoken sorrow. For a moment, I felt as if time itself had conspired to reunite us, as her familiar, ghostly features bore a striking resemblance to the portrait my grandmother once treasured. Eliza squeezed my hand tighter. "Mom, who is she?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustle of old memories. I hesitated, caught between fear and compassion, before replying. "I think she's part of our past, a spirit bound to this house by her own heartache." In that haunting instant, the apparition drifted closer, her eyes brimming with regret and a yearning for solace. The room felt charged with the weight of unfulfilled promises and lingering grief. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped forward and spoke softly. "I know your pain. We carry our own scars, too, but perhaps by facing them, we can begin to heal." My words hung in the air, mingling with the faint hum of a lullaby that seemed to rise from the attic's shadows. For a heartbeat, the ghost lingered, then, as if comforted by the acknowledgement of her suffering, she slowly receded into the dim recesses of the attic, leaving behind a silence that was both sorrowful and strangely reassuring. Eliza and I stood there, hearts entwined with the ghost's silent narrative, as the room seemed to exhale a long-held secret. As we descended back into the main hall, a fragile peace settled over our home. I knew that our encounter with the spirit was not a curse, but rather a call to confront the tangled threads of our family's past. In that bittersweet moment, I vowed to shield Eliza from the darkness, while also embracing the truths that had shaped us. Now, whenever I hear the soft creaks of our old house, or catch a glimpse of a shadow that lingers just a moment too long, I remember that fateful night. It serves as a constant reminder that our history, both the beautiful and the broken, lives on in every whispered secret and every silent tear. And through it all, I remain determined to guide my daughter with both strength and compassion, even in the face of our most haunting memories. It was a rainy evening when I, Veronica, found myself hurrying down the creaking hallways of our old family home with my daughter, Lila, clutched tightly in my arms. The rain tapped persistently against the window panes, a constant reminder that the outside world was as tumultuous as the secrets hidden within these walls. I had always believed our home to be a sanctuary, yet tonight its atmosphere was thick with unspoken dread. Lila's wide eyes darted nervously as she whispered, "Mom, do you feel that? It's like the house is breathing." Her small voice, trembling yet inquisitive, sent shivers down my spine. I could almost hear the echo of lost memories, a chorus of voices that seemed to rise from the very foundations of the house. Earlier that day, I had discovered an old journal tucked away behind a loose brick in the hallway. Its pages, yellowed with age and filled with cryptic notes, hinted at the presence of a long-forgotten tragedy, one that had stained the family legacy. The journal spoke of a hidden room, sealed off for decades, where a sorrowful secret was said to linger like a ghost, unwilling to fade. Despite my rational mind urging me to dismiss it as mere superstition, a nagging feeling told me that the past was not ready to let go. Unable to shake the uneasy sensation that had taken root in my heart, I resolved to explore the house's shadowy corners. I led Leela down a narrow staircase that spiraled into the basement, a place of echoes and damp chill that had haunted me since childhood. Every step was accompanied by the sound of my own quickening heartbeat and the soft, steady patter of rain. Overhead, in the murky light, I discovered an unmarked door behind a row of dusty, forgotten boxes. My pulse quickened as I turned the rusty knob, and the door creaked open to reveal a small, cramped room that reeked of disuse and decay. The walls were adorned with faded photographs and cryptic symbols scrawled in what looked like hurried handwriting. It was here, amidst the relics of our family's past, that I sensed the weight of unspeakable sorrow. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the room, extinguishing the weak beam of my flashlight. Leela squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes brimming with both fear and a strange determination. "Mom, maybe we should call someone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. I forced a reassuring smile, though inside, I wrestled with conflicting emotions, a blend of dread and a desperate need to uncover the truth. As I fumbled for a match, the silence was broken by a soft, almost imperceptible sound, a sigh that seemed to emanate from the very walls. In that moment, the room transformed. Shadows lengthened, and a spectral presence seemed to materialize before us. It wasn't malevolent, but rather filled with profound sadness, as though it were pleading for release from a century-old burden. In the midst of that chilling encounter, a fragment of an old lullaby echoed faintly in my memory, one my own mother had sung to me during sleepless nights. The melody, though now warped by time, carried a bittersweet promise of healing. I knelt beside Leela, and with a trembling voice, began to sing softly, the familiar notes weaving through the oppressive darkness. Slowly, the room's hostility subsided, as if the sorrowful spirit found solace in the gentle cadence of a mother's love. In that eerie, surreal moment, I realized that the secret haunting our home was not an entity to be feared, but a lingering reminder of unresolved grief, a legacy that had bound generations in silent mourning. Lila, ever perceptive despite her youth, looked up at me with eyes that seemed to say, "I understand, Mom. We're not alone," and indeed, we weren't. The past was with us, woven into every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind on. As we stepped out of the hidden room and back into the main corridor, a fragile peace had settled over the house. I knew that the journey to unearth our family's darkest chapter had only just begun. But in that moment, with Lila by my side, I felt a renewed strength of determination to face the shadows and heal the wounds of a long-forgotten past. That rainy night, as I held Leela close and listened to the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows, I understood that true courage lies not in the absence of fear, but in the willingness to confront it. And so, our quiet quest for truth continued, one whispered secret at a time. At midnight, as the old walls of my home whispered silently, I, Olivia, walked along the dark corridors with my little daughter Chloe. The moonlight filtered through dusty windows, reaching every corner of the house, filled with forgotten memories, while an indescribable unease stirred deep within me. Clutching my hand tightly, Chloe murmured, "Mom, this place feels strange. It's as if the walls are talking." In that moment, traces of an old sorrow surfaced in my heart. With every step, The creaking wooden floor carried the weight of faded memories and tears. Within me, I could sense the cold breath of a truth I had long tried to forget. That night, surrendering to Chloe's sleeplessness, I led her to one of the darkest corners of the house, the old living room. This room held the secrets of our family's past and the remnants of lost hopes. An old sofa, a coffee table displaying faded photographs, and on the wall, a portrait of a woman whose eyes brimmed with indescribable melancholia. Stranger to me greeted us. The eyes in that portrait seemed as if they wanted to reveal a dark secret hidden in the depths of our home. Then, from a corner of the room, I heard a soft rustle. It was as if an invisible hand had brushed through Chloe's hair. Her eyes lit up with terror as she whispered, "Mom, there's someone there." In that instant, the mists of the past unveiled an old pain that lay deep within our home. It was as if the house itself was eager to share a dark secret it had guarded for so long. Taking a deep breath, I clutched Chloe's hand tightly and approached that mysterious corner. With every step, the old walls echoed with forgotten sorrows and lost stories. In that moment, it felt as if the very heart of the house was beating where old loves, shattered hopes, and unfinished tales converged. I realized that the expression on the woman's face in the portrait mirrored a burden I too had borne. Sitting there, as I looked into Chloe's eyes, filled with deep fear and curiosity, I sensed a clue to easing the heavy load of the past. Perhaps this house was determined to reveal the secrets, lost memories, and unresolved reckonings that our family had hidden away for so long. That night, accompanied by the whispered voices of lost souls in every corner of the house, we could not escape becoming part of that dark secret. As I recount this tale, I still feel the chill of that night and the echoes of whispers resonating off our walls. Every step we took rewrote the dusty pages of the past into a story woven with fear and wonder. Remember, true horror comes not from what is seen, but from the presence felt deep within the heart. And I, Olivia, feel that every night, as I confront those silent screams, I am reborn through the pain of the past. Late at night, I, Alice, was quietly moving through the corridors of our home with my little daughter Emily. Although everything appeared normal, an indescribable unease churned inside me. That evening, a long-forgotten memory suddenly flickered before my eyes. Every night, in my recurring dreams, I heard whispers echoing among the old walls of our home. In those dreams, a cold voice from afar would say, "Get out of here, Alice." As the line between reality and imagination began to blur, shadows emerged in every corner. Emily's innocent smile warmed my heart, even as it slowly sowed seeds of fear. That night, Emily couldn't fall asleep. Anxious, I went into her room. There she sat quietly on her bed, watching the moonlight filter in through the window. "Why? Aren't you sleeping, sweetie?" I asked. Lifting her head slightly, Emily whispered, "Mom, there are voices. It's like they're whispering even when no one's around." My heart pounded for a moment. Curiosity about the origin of these voices dragged me back to old days, a terrifying truth from my past. At that moment, we heard a faint rustling from the oldest room in the house. The door to that room, long kept locked, now lay ajar as if pushed open by an unseen force. We decided to step inside. With every step, the creaking wooden floorboards seemed to whisper silent cries from the past. When we entered, faded family photographs and worn-out furniture greeted us. Among the faces captured in those photographs was the portrait of an unfamiliar woman whose sorrowful eyes met mine. A chill, the deepest sorrow imaginable, gripped my heart. It was as if the echo of a long-ago tragedy still haunted these walls. With trembling hands, Emily whispered, "Mom, why does it feel like that woman is watching me?" In that instant, a suppressed memory from my youth surged back. A dark night, in this very house, a secret known to no one. While I had been trying to erase the traces of the past and its painful memories, an unknown force had reawakened them. The ancient walls held stories to be told in the silence of the night. In every corner, in every crevice, lay the whispers of lost souls. Then it hit me. Emily and I were not just a family, we were part of the house's dark secret. The shadows of the past had taken up residence with us, re-emerging night after night as we slowly left the room. The fear and curiosity within me mingled with uncertain hopes for the future. I knew I had to confront the truth. This house belonged to Emily and me, only in memories, but in its dark secrets as well, and I was determined to unearth them. Every step I took into the unknown that night transformed into an unforgettable journey, where fear and curiosity interwove. Now, as I recount this story to you, I remember the silent screams of the past and that horrifying truth hidden deep within our home. Every step led me back to the cold embrace of pain and loss. But know this, true terror stems from what we do not understand, and since that night, I have never escaped the clutches of that truth. At midnight, in the silence of our home, I, Madeline, walked along the dark corridors with my little daughter, Grace. The wooden floors echoed our footsteps as if carrying forgotten whispers of the past. Deep within me, the faint tremors of a long-suppressed memory stirred. I felt that moment would gradually reveal the dark secret of our house. Grace's innocent eyes always brought both comfort and fear. In that moment, her expression carried a silent warning of the unknown. "Mom, did you hear that? It's like they're whispering even when no one is around," she murmured in her tiny voice. My heart shuddered momentarily, though I tried to suppress my fear. The sounds echoing through the cold walls carried traces of old sorrows and forgotten tragedies. That evening, I headed toward the old library in the back of the house. Among the dusty shelves, relics of bygone days, old books, faded photographs, and broken memories were hidden away. On one of the shelves, a portrait caught my eye. A woman with an indescribable melancholy in her expression, someone I had never seen before. Her eyes in the portrait seemed as if they wanted to share a piece of our house's dark past with me. Suddenly, I was startled by a cold breath on my neck. When I turned around, amidst a vague silhouette, I saw a figure whose presence was felt but did not belong to anyone. Grace trembled as she whispered, "Mom, there's someone over there." In that moment, amid the mists of the past, I became aware of an old pain lying deep within our home. It was as if the house wanted to share a dark secret it had guarded for so long. As the night wore on, every corner of the house seemed to come alive with its own story. Every creak, every breeze, echoed with memories of sorrow and lost hopes. Grace and I were drawn into this mysterious atmosphere, beginning to uncover the hidden pages of our home's past. In those moments, we were not just a mother and daughter. We were witnesses to the cursed history of this house, following the trail of its dark secrets. Now, as I recount this story, I still feel the cold breath of that night in my heart. As Madeline, Grace, and I listened to the silent screams of our home, walking a path where fear and curiosity intertwined. Every step revealed the forgotten horrors of the past. Every whisper offered a clue to the painful stories hidden deep within our walls. Remember, true fear comes not from what is seen, but from those unseen presences felt in the heart. Since that night, we have learned to live with the dark secrets of our house, always standing on the edge of confronting that eerie truth once again. My name is Harrison, and I've spent the last 2 years working on the cargo vessel Aurora's Ember. At first, life aboard was as routine as it gets. Endless days of shifting containers, navigating foggy seas, and long silent nights under a starless sky. But nothing could have prepared me for the horror that unfolded one cold, moonless night. It was a typical shift when I was assigned to the engine room for maintenance. The steady hum of the engines usually served as a comforting reminder that We were all functioning parts of a larger machine. That night, however, the sound of the engine seemed to warp into something sinister, echoing with an irregular rhythm. As I tightened a stubborn bolt, I noticed a faint reflection in a puddle. A voila figure standing behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, but found only the dim glow of the engine room lights and the deep shadows of the vessel's underbelly. Unable to shake off the unnerving feeling, I returned to my bunk in the cramped crew quarters. Sleep eluded me, replaced by a cacophony of whispers carried by the ship's creaking metal. At around 3 a.m., I awoke to the sound of footsteps echoing in the corridor. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and seemed to follow me. As I tried to calm my racing mind, I gathered my courage and stepped outside, only to find the corridor empty except for an inexplicable chill that clung to the air. The following day, I mentioned my experience to a fellow crew member, Marlowe, who was known for his skeptical nature. He dismissed it as fatigue, attributing the sounds to the natural groans of a ship battling the sea. Yet, as the day wore on, more unsettling occurrences began to disrupt our routine. Tools went missing from the workshop, only to reappear in strange, out-of-place locations, and the ship's log revealed cryptic entries from a previous voyage. Crew member named Lucien had once written about a shadow in the machine and unexplained whispers in the dark. Desperate for answers, I took it upon myself to explore the lower decks during my break. Navigating through the labyrinth of cargo holds and forgotten storage rooms, I discovered a sealed door tucked away behind an old supply closet. The door was marked with a peculiar emblem, a twisted figure that seemed to writhe in the faint light. Compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity, I managed to pry it open. Beyond lay a narrow, dust-laden passageway that reeked of decay and despair. I descended slowly, my flashlight beam trembling over walls lined with faded photographs and yellowed documents. One photograph in particular caught my eye. A black and white image of a smiling crew, their eyes oddly vacant. Scribbled in the margin was the name Isadora, a name I hadn't heard in years. The accompanying document recounted a tragic accident, a mutiny, some said, or perhaps a curse that befell the ship long ago. The deeper I ventured, the more I realized that Aurora's ember harbored secrets that had festered in silence. Later that evening, as I returned to the upper decks, the ship seemed to vibrate with a spectral energy. I could feel unseen eyes tracking. My every move and every creak of the hull was like a whispered warning. In the solitude of my cabin, the voices grew louder, murmuring fragments of long-forgotten conversations and lamenting lost souls. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, but deep down, I knew the truth. Something dark and vengeful had been awakened on our ship now. As I document these events, the horrors of that night continue to haunt me. Every time I walk the deck under the cover of darkness, I can't help but feel the weight of the past pressing in on me, a reminder that some mysteries are meant to be feared, and that in the endless depths of the sea, the line between reality and the supernatural is disturbingly thin. My name is Sterling, and I'll never forget the voyage that blurred the line between luxury and nightmare. It all began on the Celestial, my cherished yacht that promised an escape into tranquil waters. I had set sail with high hopes and a few close companions, Finn and Marlowe, seeking solace from the relentless pace of city life. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the gentle waves as we ventured into open waters. At first, the sea was serene, its vast expanse lulling us into a false sense of security. We shared stories and laughter over dinner, the yacht's sleek design and modern comforts enhancing our camaraderie. But as night fell, a strange unease took root. The ocean, usually a source of calm, seemed to whisper secrets in the rustling wind. The gentle rocking of the yacht began to feel less like a lullaby and more like a prelude to something ominous. It started subtly, a fleeting shadow along the deck, a cold spot in the cabin where warmth once reigned. I noticed that Finn was unusually quiet, his eyes scanning the dark horizon with a mix of dread and anticipation. Marlowe, usually the skeptic, began to murmur about an eerie presence that had been watching us from afar. I dismissed these as mere tricks of the mind until I discovered a series of inexplicable markings on the yacht's railing, symbols that looked eerily similar to those etched on ancient relics. As midnight approached, the calm was shattered by an inexplicable hum emanating from the engine room. I ventured down the narrow corridors, my footsteps echoing off the metal walls, until I reached a small porthole overlooking the endless dark sea. There, in the reflection of the water, I glimpsed a figure standing on the deck, a pale silhouette that vanished as quickly as it appeared. My heart pounded with the realization that the presence was not confined to our imaginations. With each passing hour, the atmosphere on the Celestial grew increasingly oppressive. Unexplained whispers began to seep through the creaks of the ship, and the once inviting cabin lights flickered erratically. I couldn't shake the sensation that something was following USA force that transcended time and logic. Bound to the sea in its haunted depths, desperate for answers, we altered course toward the coastline, hoping that the safety of solid ground might dispel the mounting terror. The journey led us to a secluded stretch of shore, where jagged rocks and receding tides carved a path through a dense fog-laden beach. As we anchored near the coast, the unsettling energy of the night seemed to intensify, as though the land itself welcomed the ominous presence. Stepping off the yacht, I felt the cold, wet sand beneath my feet, a stark reminder of our fragile mortality. The fog rolled in thick and unyielding, muffling sounds and distorting familiar shapes into grotesque shadows. Finn and Marlowe fell silent, their faces etched with fear as we made our way toward an old, abandoned beach house that stood precariously at the water's edge. Its windows, dark and vacant, appeared like watchful eyes that had seen too many tragedies. Inside the decaying house, every creak of the floorboards and gust of wind through broken panes amplified the dread that had taken root in my heart. In one forlorn room, I discovered a diary bound in weathered leather, its pages filled with desperate scribbles and names long forgotten. The entries told of cursed voyages and restless spirits condemned to wander between the sea and the shore, an echo of the very presence that had followed us from the Celestial. Now, as dawn's first light battles the lingering darkness, I sit here on a creaking bed in that desolate house, still gripped by the remnants of that horrifying night. The journey from the luxurious escape of the yacht to this forsaken coastal refuge has left me with a chilling certainty. Some forces are eternal, and the true horror lies in knowing that the line between our world and the spectral realm is perilously thin. My name is Felix, and I still vividly recall that terrifying incident that occurred while working on board. It all started during the later hours of my routine shift, as everything proceeded in a quiet, orderly manner, while conducting my regular checks on the cargo vessel Celestial Voyager. An unusual signal suddenly appeared on the radar screen. At first, I assumed it was just a technical malfunction. On the screen, outside of the normal vessel track surrounding us, there was a lone object, moving slowly and without a clearly defined shape. My heart began to pound. This object bore no resemblance to anything reported or seen in regular maritime traffic. Filled with both excitement and fear, I immediately informed my colleague Tristan. He began conducting a meticulous examination, yet the signal persisted on the radar, as if an unknown presence was silently watching us. Working on deck in the cold darkness, with the low hum of the wind and the gentle crash of waves, the existence of that mysterious object was etched into my mind like a nightmare. Later, our radar operator Milo also focused on the screen and started to analyze the technical details of the object. Our observations revealed that it moved slowly relative to our vessel, almost harmoniously with the rhythm of the waves. With no defined shape, this entity seemed to have emerged from the dark depths of the sea, Everything felt so real. The clarity of the radar signal and the object's coordinates made it seem as if it were staring right at us. Fear and curiosity intertwined. My colleagues, Tristan and Milo, maintained their composure, while I began to conduct detailed analyses in the technical room. The records confirmed that nothing like this had ever been encountered before. At that moment, all the lights on the ship seemed to suddenly dim, and a profound silence fell over us. The signal on the screen lingered, gradually morphing into a vague silhouette with indistinct lines before fading away. The terror of that moment instilled an uneasy atmosphere among the crew, as if that unknown entity was drawing near, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the later hours of the night, when the signal completely disappeared, a sense of normalcy slowly returned to the ship. Yet the horror I experienced left an indelible mark within me. Once all systems confirmed that this was not merely a technical glitch or transient interference, the extraordinary nature of that moment became the talk of the crew. Since that day, every time I stand watch on deck at night, I can still feel the haunting memory of that mysterious signal in the corner of the radar screen. Truly, it felt as if an entirely different, frightening, and unknown entity was roaming the deep waters. This experience has added an unexpected layer of terror to my otherwise routine work life, painfully revealing the fine line between reality and the unknown. Even now, as I write these lines, I cannot forget the shiver that night brought and the cold tremor that still echoes in my heart. As someone who works on a ship, despite pushing the boundaries of technology and science, I have painfully learned that some mysteries hidden in the depths of the sea are beyond our comprehension. My name is Damien, and I'll never forget that night shift when the darkness on board whispered secrets no one wanted to hear. I was working in the engine room of the cargo vessel Eclipse Voyager, a ship known more for its solitude on the open sea than for any eerie tales. The hours were long, and the hum of machinery was my constant companion, until one particular night when the shadows seemed to move of their own accord. That it was well past midnight, and the ship was cloaked in the thick silence of a starlit sea. As I methodically checked the equipment, a peculiar chill slithered through the corridors, a sensation that felt almost tangible. At first, I dismissed it as a draft caused by the ship's old infrastructure, but the cold intensified, and a nagging feeling of being watched crept over me. While performing routine maintenance near the cargo hold, I noticed something odd. Amid the flickering overhead light, a dark shape appeared momentarily at the end of the hallway. I paused, heart pounding, and strained to focus on the vague outline. It was as if someone or something had been standing there, concealed by the shadows. I blinked, and the figure was gone, leaving only an unsettling void in its wake. Troubled, I decided to trace the anomaly. My footsteps echoed softly on the metal floor as I followed the path where the shape had been seen. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the low buzz of electrical circuits and the distant clatter of shifting containers. As I rounded a corner, I caught a faint reflection in a polished surface, a silhouette that did not match any crew member I knew. Its form was blurred, almost spectral, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw eyes that glimmered with a strange, sorrowful intensity. Unable to shake the feeling of impending dread, I returned to my station to report the incident. My colleagues, Orion and Cassidy, listened with a mix of concern and skepticism. They assured me that the night's long hours and the ship's creaks could easily distort one's perception. Yet I couldn't dismiss the encounter. The darkness that night seemed different, more alive, more intent. As the shift wore on, the strange occurrences multiplied. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and soft whispers seemed to echo from empty rooms. At one point, while inspecting the navigation room, I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. I spun around, but no one was there. Only the persistent hum of the machinery and the distant sound of waves crashing against the hull. By the time my shift ended, a palpable unease had settled over the Eclipse Voyager. I couldn't help but wonder if the ship itself harbored a secret, a lingering presence from a past long forgotten. Some of the older crew whispered about a tale of a former sailor who vanished without a trace, his spirit doomed to wander the corridors of the ship on moonless nights. Now, as I sit alone in my quarters, the memory of that night remains etched in my mind. The darkness aboard the Eclipse Voyager was more than the absence of light, it was a living entity, a silent witness to mysteries that defy explanation. The spectral encounters and inexplicable chills have left me with an enduring question. In the endless expanse of the ocean, can the veil between the known and the unknown ever truly be lifted? Even now, I can almost hear the echoes of that fateful night, the soft footsteps, the fleeting shadows, and that distant, sorrowful gaze that continues to haunt me. My name is Dorian, and I've spent countless nights at sea aboard the cargo vessel Sea Echo. Most nights pass in a haze of routine, monitoring gauges, recording logs, and listening to the rhythmic pulse of the engines. But one particular night, as a thick fog enveloped the ship and the horizon vanished into a ghostly white, my world shifted into something unexplainable. It began during a late shift in the control room. The radar displayed the usual blips of passing vessels and distant shores, until a new, unidentifiable signal appeared, a dim, wavering shape that drifted near our course. I stared at the screen, perplexed by its slow, deliberate movement. I reported the anomaly to my colleague Edmund, who, though skeptical, agreed to monitor it further. As the hours wore on, the fog outside grew denser, and the eerie silence on board deepened. I took my routine walk along the deck, the chill of the night air mingling with an inexplicable heaviness in my heart. The ship's lights cast long, trembling shadows across the wooden deck. Amid the quiet, I heard what I first thought was the distant toll of a bell, echoing faintly over the water. But there was no bell on sea, echo only, the haunting sound of a melody, distorted and forlorn. Drawn by a mix of dread and morbid curiosity, I followed the sound toward the bow. There, amidst the swirling fog, I saw a fleeting figure. It was as if someone had been standing at the edge of the ship, staring out into the abyss. The figure was dressed in outdated, worn clothing, and its face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. I blinked, and when I looked again, it had vanished, leaving behind only a lingering whisper in the wind that seemed to say, "Remember." Disturbed and unable to shake the feeling of being watched, I returned to the control room and informed Edmund and Lydia, our navigation officer. Lydia examined the radar feed and noted that the mysterious shape had reappeared briefly before dissolving into static. Although the explanation could have been equipment malfunction, something in the way the figure moved, so human, yet so ethereal, felt far too deliberate to be a simple glitch. Later that night, as the storm began to gather strength and the sea roiled with restless energy, I found myself alone on the deck. The heavy mist wrapped around me like a shroud, and the only sounds were the creaking of the ship's hull and the distant, mournful calls of unseen seabirds. Then, amid the chaos of the rising wind, I caught sight of another phenomenon, a series of footprints appearing in the damp deck, leading toward the stern. The prints were small and delicate, as if left by someone not meant for the harsh environment of the open sea. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I followed the trail, my heart hammering with a mix of fear and determination. The footprints led me to a secluded corner near a storage bay, where I discovered an old, water-stained envelope wedged behind a crate. Inside, I found a faded letter addressed to Captain in spidery handwriting. The letter spoke of a tragic voyage decades ago, of a crew lost in a sudden, violent storm, and of a promise to return for redemption. The final line sent shivers down my spine. I await the day when the Sea Echo carries my soul home. At that moment, the fog thickened even more, and I sensed a presence behind me. I spun around, but the deck lay empty, except for the echo of my own rapid breaths. Was it possible that the spirit of a long-lost sailor was now haunting the ship? The letter, the footprints, and the spectral figure all converged into a single, haunting truth that I was not alone on that doomed voyage. When the storm subsided and dawn began to break, the fog gradually lifted to reveal the calm, open sea once more. Yet, even in the soft light of morning, the memory of that night remained etched in my mind. Edmund and Lydia dismissed my account as the product of an overactive imagination and the stress of the relentless sea, but I knew what I had experienced was far beyond mere fatigue. Now, as I write these words in the quiet aftermath, I remain haunted by the mysteries of that night, the gentle, ghostly melody, the fleeting figure on the deck, and the promise sealed within a weathered letter. The boundaries between the living and the lost blurred on that stormy night, leaving me with the lingering question, in the vast, uncharted depths of the sea, can the spirits of the past ever truly rest? The Silent Grove. My name is Jonathan, and I have always believed that the forest holds truths far older than our fleeting lives. One bitter autumn night, driven by a restless spirit and a longing for answers, I entered a secluded grove where time itself seemed to stand still. The trees, towering and solemn, formed a silent congregation under the shroud of darkness. Their branches, intertwined like the hands of mourners, created a natural vault that trapped the ghostly light of a hidden moon. Every step I took on the carpet of withered leaves stirred echoes of a forgotten past. Not long after my arrival, I encountered a peculiar sight, a narrow, winding trail illuminated by the eerie glow of fireflies. Along this path, I met a reclusive woman named Vivian, whose somber eyes betrayed a lifetime of secrets and silent agony. "You have come seeking what no one dares to utter," she murmured, her voice resonating with both caution and despair. Together, we ventured deeper into the grove, drawn by a mutual compulsion to unearth the mysteries that lay beneath the forest's ancient veneer. As we navigated through the labyrinth of twisted roots and shadowed clearings, Vivian recounted the harrowing tale of Nathaniel Reed, a man whose love was shattered by treachery and whose spirit was doomed to wander this very grove. His beloved Lillian had perished under inexplicable circumstances, and Nathaniel's grief had given birth to a curse, one that bound his soul to the forest, transforming every whisper of wind into a lament for a love forever lost. The very air around us grew thick with the weight of his sorrow, and I could feel the spectral presence of his tortured spirit in every rustle of leaves and distant groan of the earth. Our path eventually led us to a clearing dominated by a colossal, century tree whose trunk was marred by deep, jagged scars. At its base lay a weathered journal, its pages brittle and stained with time. I knelt down to read the faded words, each sentence unraveling the tragic tapestry of Nathaniel's life, a narrative of passion turned to despair, of hope crushed under the relentless march of fate. The journal spoke of clandestine meetings, promises of eternal love, and a final, heart-wrenching betrayal that sealed the fate of both Nathaniel and Lillian. As I absorbed every painful detail, the air grew colder and the silence more oppressive, as though the forest itself mourned the loss of what might have been. Vivian's expression was one of profound sorrow as she confessed that she, too, was haunted by the grove's tragic legacy. "Some souls," she whispered, "are so entwined with nature's sorrow that they become one with its endless lament." In that instant, I felt an overwhelming kinship with the forest and its spectral inhabitants, a bond forged through shared grief and the inexorable passage of time. The grove seemed to breathe with an ancient melancholy, each heartbeat of the earth echoing the lost dreams of those who had come before me. As dawn's fragile light began to break through the canopy, I reluctantly bid farewell to Vivian and the silent, grieving grove. My heart was heavy with the burden of untold sorrows, yet I also carried a newfound understanding of the profound connection between love, loss, and nature's eternal cycle. I emerged from the forest forever changed, knowing that its whispered secrets would forever echo within me, a constant reminder that some mysteries are destined to remain veiled in sorrow and silence. Moonlit Thorns. I am Caroline, a wanderer whose heart seeks solace in the wild, untamed embrace of nature. One fateful night, drawn by an inexplicable longing, I ventured into a dense forest where the moonlight barely pierced the thick canopy. The forest was a realm of contradictions, a place where beauty mingled with despair, and every rustle of leaves seemed to conceal a hidden lament. My footsteps, muffled by a carpet of fallen leaves, carried me deeper into this enchanted yet forbidding wilderness. Almost immediately, I sensed that I was not alone. The air was heavy with a strange energy, and every sound was amplified, as if the forest itself were alive and aware of my presence. As I pressed on, I discovered a narrow path bordered by wild thorn bushes that seemed to weep crimson droplets. In the pale moonlight, it was here that I met a mysterious man named Damien, whose intense gaze belied secrets buried deep within the forest's ancient heart. "This place is cursed," he warned, his voice a mix of sorrow and urgency, "and those who wander here often carry more than just memories." His words sent a shiver down my spine, yet an irresistible curiosity compelled me to follow him. Damien led me to a clearing where the remnants of an old ritual site lay in disarray. In the center stood a shattered stone altar adorned with faded carvings and cryptic symbols. As I approached, I discovered a delicate pendant resting upon the cold stone, a pendant engraved with the initials RJ. The discovery triggered a flood of images in my mind. The tragic tale of Rebecca James, a young woman who had once been the victim of unspeakable betrayal and whose spirit was said to haunt these very woods in search of retribution. Each gust of wind and every creak of the ancient trees seemed to murmur her mournful name. The night grew darker still as Damien and I navigated a labyrinth of shadowy trails. The forest transformed around us into a surreal stage where time itself appeared to falter. Ethereal lights flickered between the trees, and phantom silhouettes danced at the edge of my vision. I could not shake the feeling that Rebecca's tormented soul was watching us, her despair woven into the very fabric of the night. Damien spoke in hushed tones of an ancient curse, one that condemned Rebecca to roam these woods, her spirit forever bound to the tragic echoes of her shattered life. In a final act of defiance against the inevitable, I reached out and clutched the pendant, feeling its cold weight as if it carried the burden of Rebecca's endless sorrow. The forest roared with a primal lament, and in that moment, I understood that my fate was entwined with its cursed legacy. Damien's eyes glistened with unspoken grief as we stood amidst the ruins of forgotten dreams, our hearts pounding in unison with the mournful rhythm of the earth. The forest had claimed us both, leaving indelible marks upon our souls that would haunt us long after the first light of dawn. As I eventually emerged from the clutches of that haunted realm, I carried with me the bittersweet memory of a night when the living and the dead converged under a moonlit sky. Every step I take now is shadowed by the echo of Rebecca's lament, a constant reminder that some wounds never truly heal, and that the forest's eternal sorrow continues to whisper its secrets to those brave enough to listen. Echoes in the thicket. I am Benjamin, and the forest has always been my sanctuary from a world that no longer felt real. That night, beneath a sky void of stars, I stepped into the dense thicket, where every leaf and branch seemed to murmur forgotten sorrows. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and an inexplicable chill settled over me. As I navigated the narrow path, the silence was pierced only by the distant call of a forlorn owl, as if mourning the loss of an ancient secret. I soon encountered a peculiar clearing, its center dominated by a large, weathered stone engraved with cryptic symbols. The air vibrated with a palpable energy, and I felt drawn toward it by a force I could not explain. Just then, A soft voice broke the stillness, a voice that belonged to a woman named Serena. Her eyes, deep and sorrowful, revealed a lifetime of grief and mystery. "You must listen," she murmured, "for the forest speaks in echoes of the past." Her words stirred something deep within me, and I found myself unable to turn away. Serena led me through winding trails, lined with towering firs and creeping vines. Along the way, she recounted a tale of a lost love and a betrayal so profound that it cursed the very soul of the forest. The story was that of Oliver, a man whose promise of eternal love was shattered by treachery, leaving his beloved Elara to wander these woods as a spirit of despair. Every rustle of leaves and every gust of wind seemed to echo Elara's lament, a sorrow that had seeped into the roots of the trees. As we journeyed deeper into the thicket, the surroundings grew increasingly surreal. The interplay of light and shadow created shapes that shifted with every heartbeat, and the ground beneath my feet pulsed as if alive. I began to notice subtle signs: a withered flower placed on a mossy rock, a trail of luminescent fungi that formed an unearthly path, of which pointed toward a presence that was both ancient and malignant. The deeper we ventured, the more I felt the oppressive weight of the forest's dark memories pressing in around us. At the heart of the thicket, we came upon an abandoned shrine covered in tangled ivy. The stone altar bore the unmistakable marks of grief, and in the dim glow of twilight, I could almost see the spectral form of Elara, her eyes filled with endless sorrow. Serena's voice trembled as she whispered the final part of the tale: a curse cast by a spurned lover that doomed the spirit of Elara to eternal wandering, forever trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead. In that haunted moment, as a cold wind swept through the clearing, I realized that the forest was more than a mere collection of trees and shadows. It was a living chronicle of broken promises and eternal regret. With trembling hands and a racing heart, I vowed to remember the sorrow of Elara and the secrets hidden among the ancient boughs. The forest had revealed its tragic history to me, and I could feel its spectral embrace lingering long after I had left the shrine. Every step I took away from that cursed glade was heavy with the weight of 1,000 lost souls. Even now, as I write these words, the echoes of that night persist in my mind, a relentless reminder that some tragedies refuse to be silenced by time, and that the forest's whispers will forever haunt those who dare to listen. Shadows of the Greenwood. I never believed in legends until that night in the heart of the Greenwood. My name is Lucas, and as I ventured into the depths of the forest, seeking escape from a world that had grown too loud, I instead found an eerie silence that spoke of hidden terrors. The towering oaks and whispering willows formed a natural cathedral, their ancient boughs sheltering secrets that had long been forgotten. With only the sound of my own breath for company, I pressed deeper into the dark maze of nature. My journey took an unexpected turn when I stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown trail marked by strange, arcane symbols etched into the bark of gnarled trees. The symbols pulsed faintly, as if imbued with a spectral energy that urged me onward. My pulse quickened with both excitement and fear. Just as I began to question my sanity, I encountered a figure emerging from the gloom, a slender woman named Felicity, whose eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity. "You have come for the truth," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. I followed her through winding paths that twisted like the coils of a serpent. Each step revealed more of the forest's haunted Visagia clearing, where the ground was carpeted with withered petals and a silent stream that glistened under a sickly, unnatural light. Felicity recounted a tale of love and betrayal, of a man named Donovan who had once promised eternal devotion, only to abandon his beloved, leaving her to wander these woods as a restless spirit. Her words conjured images of passion turned to despair and dreams shattered beneath the weight of treachery. As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive with ghostly apparitions. The wind carried the faint echoes of Donovan's anguished cries, and shadows danced in a macabre ballet. Around us, Felicity's countenance grew more sorrowful, and I felt the oppressive presence of unseen forces drawing near. In a clearing lit by a pallid, otherworldly glow, we discovered a decrepit stone monument inscribed with cryptic verses. I reached out to trace the carvings, and in that instant, a torrent of memories flooded my mind, visions of a tragic past, of promises broken and hearts left to wither in the cold embrace of the night. The spectral presence of Felicity seemed to intensify as the wind howled its mournful lament. I realized that the forest was not merely a setting for nature's beauty, but a repository for souls burdened by sorrow. The realization chilled me to the core, and I knew that I, too, had become entangled in a tale of eternal longing and spectral vengeance. Donovan's curse, it seemed, had spread like a plague through the greenwood, and I was now a reluctant witness to its dark legacy. In the final moments before dawn, as the first rays of a hesitant sun pierced the canopy, Felicity vanished. Like mist in the morning light, I was left alone with the echoes of her lament and the haunting knowledge that the greenwood held mysteries far darker than I had ever imagined. My footsteps, heavy with regret and trepidation, carried me out of the forest, but the shadows of that cursed night continued to follow me, a perpetual reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed. Whispers among the pines. My name is Ethan, and I have always sought refuge in the forest's silent embrace. Tonight, as I wander beneath ancient pines, a cold shiver of dread courses through my veins. The moon hides behind swirling clouds, leaving the gnarled branches to cast twisted shadows on the forest floor. Every snap of a twig and rustle of leaves whispers secrets of old, a language known only to the night. I had come here searching for solace after a life of isolation, yet this evening, the forest seems determined to reveal its haunted past. I round a bend and discover an oddly placed stone circle, half swallowed by moss and ivy. In the center lies a small ornate box engraved with mysterious symbols. My trembling hand reaches out, and the moment my fingers graze its surface, a gust of icy wind sweeps through the trees. From the darkness, a soft, sorrowful voice speaks. Follow me. Uncover what was lost. I hesitate, heart pounding in sync with the rhythm of my fear. Yet an irresistible compulsion forces me onward. The forest thickens as I follow the echo of that ghostly call. Amid the ancient trunks, I meet a man named Marcus, whose eyes reflect a deep, unspoken tragedy. He tells me of a forgotten tale, a woman named Amelia Voss, whose spirit roams these woods after a betrayal that doomed her soul. Each step we take reveals more inexplicable signs, an abandoned locket dangling from a branch, the faint scent of lavender that recalls distant memories, and a series of cryptic carvings on tree barks that seem to narrate a story of love and lost. As midnight approaches, the forest transforms into a labyrinth of spectral forms and murmuring winds. Shadows merge into shapes that taunt my mind, and the line between reality and nightmare blurs. Marcus and I reach an ancient clearing where a derelict cabin stands as a silent sentinel of despair. Inside, yellowed diaries recount the tale of Amelia Voss, her love betrayed, and her soul left to wander eternally. Suddenly, in the dim light, a pale figure materializes before us. It is Amelia herself, her eyes brimming with sorrow, her presence both terrifying and mesmerizing. I feel an overwhelming mixture of pity and horror as she extends a trembling hand, as if begging me to free her from an eternal curse. The cabin trembles, and every creak of its decaying wood is a dirge for lost time. In that moment, the forest and I share a silent understanding. The past's agony is woven into the roots and winds, binding us together in a fate we did not choose. As Amelia's figure slowly dissolves into the darkness, Marcus and I stand frozen, our souls forever marked by the revelation of the forest's hidden lament. I depart with the weight of her sorrow in my heart, knowing that this night has irrevocably changed the course of my existence. Every step away from that cursed clearing echoes the promise that some secrets, once unveiled, can never be forgotten. A chill lingers in my bones as I retrace my path. The forest's whispered secrets now etched in my memory. The night air, filled with the murmurs of the past, assures me that I will forever carry the burden of this encounter, burden that is both a curse and a strange, unyielding comfort. The last echo of Camp Blue Water in Cassandra, and one misty autumn evening, I journeyed with my daughter Aurora to Camp Blue Water, a secluded haven once bustling with summer laughter, but now shrouded in an unsettling quiet. The camp lay beside a vast, murky lake whose surface mirrored the dim glow of a waning moon. We set up our tent on a small knoll overlooking the water, the silence around us both inviting and foreboding. As night fell, the camp took on an eerie quality. The distant lapping of the water against the shore merged with the whispering wind, creating a symphony of sound that was both soothing and deeply unnerving. While Aurora and I sat by a dwindling campfire, I noticed ripples spreading across the lake, as though something beneath the surface stirred. A chill ran down my spine when I heard a faint, almost imperceptible hum, a mournful melody that seemed to emanate from the depths of the lake itself. Unable to ignore the pull of the unknown, I ventured closer to the water's edge, with Aurora following hesitantly behind. There, amid the fog and the soft glow of fireflies, I felt an inexplicable presence, a weight of sorrow and longing that seemed to emanate from the lake. "Mom, why does it feel like the water is calling to us?" Aurora asked, her voice small against the vastness of the night. I could only shake my head, feeling that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. The rest of the night passed in a blur of restless sleep and fleeting shadows. By morning, as the mist lifted and the first rays of sun revealed the camp in a new light, the haunting melody had faded, leaving behind only the lingering echo of its sorrow. Aurora and I packed our belongings in silence, each of us changed by the spectral experience at Camp Blue Water. The memory of that night of ghostly echoes and a lake that whispered secrets remains with me, as a reminder that sometimes the past refuses to let go, even in the quiet moments of our escape into nature. The vanishing campfire, Ophelia, and one chilly winter's evening, I ventured with my daughter Jasmine to a rugged camp nestled at the edge of a snow-covered forest. We built our fire outside our rugged tent, its orange glow offering a temporary sanctuary against the biting cold. The flames danced merrily, casting long, wavering shadows over the icy ground. As the night deepened, I began to notice something peculiar. Between bursts of laughter and whispered bedtime stories, a subtle change occurred. The fire's warmth seemed to wane inexplicably. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a figure moving behind the dancing flames. It was as if the fire itself was trying to reveal a hidden presence. I leaned closer, heart pounding, only to see the figure vanish into thin air. "Mom, did you see that?" Jasmine asked, her voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and fear. I nodded, too stunned to speak, as an unexplainable chill crept over me. The fire's glow flickered erratically, casting phantom shapes that merged with the darkness. In the following moments, the night seemed to stretch into an endless expanse of uncertainty. The forest around us whispered with an otherworldly stillness, and the memory of that vanishing figure imprinted itself upon my mind. When morning came, the campfire had burned down to embers, leaving behind only a lingering sense of loss and the nagging feeling that we'd briefly crossed paths with something beyond our understanding. Now, whenever I sit by a fire, I remain alert to the possibility of unseen presences dancing in the shadows. Whispers in the woods, see Miranda, and one late summer, I took my daughter Elise to a remote woodland camp. The site was a small clearing surrounded by towering oaks and whispering birches. where the night air was alive with the rustle of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal creatures. We pitched our tent under a sky streaked with twilight hues, eager for an escape from the ordinary. That night, as Elise fell asleep to the lullaby of nature, I found myself drawn to the edge of the forest. The wind carried soft, almost indistinguishable, whispers voices that seemed to murmur secrets too ancient to decipher. With each step I took, the voices grew clearer, though still elusive, as if trying to tell me something. I paused near a copse of trees, straining to catch every syllable, when a sudden gust silenced the murmurs, leaving a deafening stillness in its wake. Returning to camp, I discovered that Elise had awakened. "Mom, the trees are talking," she whispered, eyes wide, with a mixture of wonder and fear. I reassured her, though my own heart pounded with questions I couldn't answer. The next few hours were filled with moments of eerie silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the creaking of ancient branches. It was as if the forest itself was alive with memories of loss, of longing, of secrets too painful to forget. By dawn, the whispers had faded into the natural chorus of morning birds, yet their echo remained with me. I often wonder if the trees were speaking of forgotten tragedies, or lost souls, seeking solace in the embrace of the woods. Elise and I left that camp with an unspoken understanding that the forest held mysteries beyond our reach, a silent pact between nature and those daring enough to listen. The midnight Halimizadora, and one autumn weekend, I brought my daughter Beatrice to a lakeside camp tucked away in a secluded valley. The camp was quiet, the air crisp with the promise of falling leaves and the scent of pine. We pitched our tent near a dark lake that mirrored the starry sky, and a gentle campfire provided our only comfort against the night's chill. At midnight, while Beatrice slept soundlessly in her sleeping bag, a sudden, spine-chilling howl shattered the calm. I was roused by the sound, a long, mournful cry that seemed to resonate from deep within the lake. My heart raced as I peered into the darkness beyond the firelight, the howl echoing off the distant trees. Compelled by both dread and maternal concern, I stepped outside with my lantern, calling softly for Beatrice. In the distance, under the full moon's gaze, I saw ripples on the lake stir, as though something was emerging. The haunting howl repeated, more desperate and sorrowful, sending shivers down my spine. I hurried back to the tent, rousing Beatrice. With a gentle shake, her eyes, still heavy with sleep, opened wide as I whispered, "Did you hear that, my dear?" She nodded silently, as if understanding a terror I couldn't fully explain. Throughout the night, the echo of that midnight cry haunted us, a spectral reminder of nature's unfathomable secrets. Even now, whenever the wind carries a distant howl, I wonder if the lake's sorrowful spirit still calls out for something lost long ago. The forgotten Traileme Adelaide, and one early summer, I took my daughter Lydia on a camping trip deep in the wilderness. We arrived at a remote clearing where a narrow, winding trail disappeared into an ancient forest. The day was warm, but as dusk settled, a cool mist crept in, transforming the familiar path into a shadowy passage of uncertainty. That first night, after setting up our small camp beside a trickling stream, Lydia and I huddled near a modest fire. The flames cast dancing figures on the bark of towering trees, and every rustle in the underbrush made my heart skip a beat. While Lydia dozed off beneath her woolen blanket, I sat awake, listening to the forest's chorus. It wasn't long before I noticed something, a faint, rhythmic tapping along the trail, as if unseen footsteps were pacing the woods. Unable to shake the disquiet, I quietly rose to investigate. With only a small lantern in hand, I followed the sound down the forgotten trail. Each step was accompanied by an eerie silence punctuated only by the occasional snap of a twig. At one point, I caught sight of a shadow moving in the corner of my Aja shape that vanished when I turned to look directly. My pulse thundered as I hurried back, the echo of that ghostly tap clinging to me. When I returned to camp, Lydia's wide, sleep-filled eyes met mine, as if questioning my absence. "Mom, were you walking with the trees?" she asked in a sleepy murmur. I forced a smile, though deep inside I wondered if the forest held memories of lost souls and hidden tragedies. Even now, whenever I wander near ancient trails, I feel that unspoken presence, a reminder that some paths are best left forgotten. Echoes in the mountain, Fogim Daphne, and I once took my daughter Violet to a mountain camp shrouded in an ethereal fog that seemed to blur the boundaries between the living and the spectral. The high-altitude air was crisp and invigorating, and the narrow trails wound their way through ancient groves and rocky outcrops. As we trekked along a winding path, the dense mist clung to us, turning familiar landmarks into ghostly apparitions. With every step, the forest revealed its hidden side whispers, carried on the wind, soft and sorrowful, as if the mountain itself was mourning a forgotten past. During one particularly silent stretch of our journey, a sudden gust of wind stirred the fog, and with it came a chorus of voices, barely audible murmurs that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath our feet. "Do you hear that, Mom?" Violet asked, her wide eyes reflecting a mix of wonder and unease. I could only nod, struggling to reconcile the rational part of my mind with the inexplicable phenomenon unfolding around us. That night, when we sought refuge in a small, lantern-lit cabin, the voices returned. They seeped through the wooden walls and crept under the door, forming a spectral symphony of grief and longing as we lay in our creaking beds. The mournful echoes enveloped us, and every creak of the floorboards and every sigh of the wind seemed laden with ancient sorrow. The mountain, with its time-worn trails and secretive silence, had imprinted its melancholic history onto our souls. Violet's soft, anxious questions in the dark became a shared ritual, a quiet acknowledgement of the mystery that defied explanation. By dawn, as the fog began to lift and the mountain revealed its rugged beauty once more, I knew that the experience had changed us irrevocably. The echoes of that night still reverberate in my mind, a reminder that some mysteries are woven into the very fabric of nature, destined to haunt those who dare to listen. The cabin in the shadows. My name is Serena, and one crisp autumn, I journeyed with my daughter Lacey to a remote forest camp, famed for its long-abandoned cabana, structure whispered about in local lore for its eerie past. As twilight descended, the dilapidated cabin emerged from the gloom like a relic of another era. Its broken windows and sagging roof hinting at secrets best left undisturbed. With hesitant steps, we approached the weathered building, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the only sound breaking the heavy silence of the forest onside. The cabin was cloaked in darkness and decay. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. Lacey, both fascinated and fearful, wandered cautiously through the dim corridors, while I felt an inexplicable chill creeping along my spine. Every creak of the wooden floor and every rustle of unseen movement set my nerves on edge. As a storm gathered outside, lightning briefly illuminated the interior, revealing faded photographs and time-worn relics that spoke of lives long past. Later, that night, as the wind howled and rain battered the fragile walls, I was startled awake by the sound of soft footsteps echoing in a narrow corridor. Rushing to Lacey's side, I found her huddled by a frosted window, eyes fixed on a dark corner where shadows seemed to twist and merge into an unearthly form. "Mom, I think someone's here," she whispered, voice quivering like the tremble of a dying flame. My heart pounded as I stepped toward the source of the sound, each step filled with dread and a desperate need to protect my child. In that long, harrowing moment, the cabin's history seemed to press in around us, palpable sorrow and an unseen presence that defied explanation. I felt as if the very walls were imbued with the grief of lost souls, reaching out with spectral fingers to reclaim a part of their past. With trembling resolve, I led Lacey back to our tent, the echo of unseen footsteps following us into the stormy night. At first light, as the tempest subsided, we fled the cabin, its haunted legacy etched permanently into our memories. Even now, the recollection of that stormy night lingers, a reminder that some places harbor deep, unspeakable sorrow, waiting silently in the shadows for those brave enough to listen. The lake's lament me name is Harper, and last summer I camped by a secluded lake with my daughter Fiona. Our little campsite, nestled on a crescent of land where the water caressed the shore in gentle ripples, was a haven of tranquility. By day, we built a fire near the water's edge, its orange glow reflecting on the still surface and filling us with a warm sense of safety. But as dusk gave way to night, an unsettling quiet began to settle over the lake, and the gentle lapping of water turned into a harbinger of something far more eerie. At the stroke of midnight, the calm was shattered. A sudden mournful wail arose from the depths of the lake, as if the water itself were crying out in sorrow. I bolted to Fiona's side and found her staring transfixed at the dark expanse, eyes brimming with tears and unspoken questions. "Mom, who's crying?" she whispered, voice quivering like the leaves in a gentle breeze. I peered into the darkness, but the lake offered no clear answer, only a vast, reflective surface that seemed to hold endless secrets beneath its placid veneer. The night grew colder, and a dense mist began to roll over the water, blurring the line between lake and sky. The anguished wail would rise in bursts, echoing across the silent shore, and then vanish as suddenly as it had come. Fiona and I huddled together by the dying embers of our fire, our hearts pounding in synchrony with the inexplicable cries. From the deep, each sound felt like a lament for lost souls, or a forgotten tragedy buried beneath layers of time and water. In those long, harrowing hours, the lake transformed into something otherworldly, a place where nature's grief echoed in every ripple and every sigh of the wind. When dawn finally broke, the mist lifted, and the lake returned to its deceptive tranquility. But the memory of that sorrowful night lingered like an unwelcome shadow. Fiona and I left the campsite with our hearts heavy and our minds filled with questions. The lake's lament had etched itself into our souls, a reminder that even the most serene places can harbor echoes of profound loss and mystery. The whispering Pinnaseem Clara, and one summer I took my daughter Isabel to a secluded forest camp deep in the heart of ancient pines. We arrived as dusk painted the sky in fading gold and bruised purples, and the air carried a promise of mystery. Our modest tent lay near a softly babbling creek, its murmur almost like a lullaby. That first night, while Isabel slept soundly curled in her favorite blanket, I found myself unable to rest. The towering pines outside, their silhouettes etched against the starry firmament, seemed to whisper secrets in a language only the wind could understand at first. The sounds were subtler, gentle rustle here, a distant sigh there, but as midnight deepened, a peculiar murmur grew louder. It was as if the trees were speaking directly to me, uttering my name in a soft, sorrowful tone. Heart pounding with both curiosity and dread, I slipped out of the tent, my feet crunching on the needle-strewn ground. The moon's silver glow filtered through the branches, casting wavering shadows that danced along the forest floor. Every snap of a twig made me wonder if unseen eyes were following my every step. Drawn by the uncanny sound, I ventured along a narrow, winding trail that seemed to lead deeper into the wilderness. The forest felt alive, charged with an energy both eerie and mesmerizing. I paused frequently, straining my ears for that whispered call, until I reached a small clearing where a flicker of light, soft and pulsing, danced between the trees. I called out for Isabel, but my voice was swallowed by the vast chorus of rustling leaves and distant murmurs. Returning to camp, I discovered Isabel awake, her wide eyes reflecting a mix of fear and wonder. Clutching her favorite teddy, she whispered, "Mom, did you hear it too?" Though I struggled to explain the inexplicable, that night left an indelible mark on both our souls. The forest, with its ancient pines and whispered secrets, had revealed a hidden world, one where nature itself communicated in a language of mystery and melancholy. In the days that followed, every gust of wind through the pines brought back the memory of that spectral call. Even now, whenever I walk by a stand of ancient trees, I feel that familiar tingle of unease and wonder, as if the forest is reminding me of its timeless secret. Our experience became a silent pact between Isabel and me, a bond forged in the whispering darkness of the pines, where the past and present converged in a moment of pure, inexplicable magic. Shadows by the campfire of Juliet, and one brisk autumn weekend, I embarked on a camping trip with my daughter Rosie beneath a tapestry of shimmering stars. Our campfire was the heart of our little world, a warm beacon against the chill of the night, around which we shared laughter, whispered secrets, and spun tales of wonder. The firelight painted dancing patterns on our faces and made the surrounding darkness seem almost magical. Yet, as the flames flickered and the night deepened, something unusual began to stir at the fringes of our circle. While I was lost in thought, the dancing shadows caught my attention. There was one shadow that did not mimic any movement of the other campers. It slithered along the perimeter of our firelight in a way that felt deliberate and unsettling. "Mom, there's someone watching us," Rosie murmured, her small voice trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. Clasping her hand, I stepped away from the comforting glow of the fire and into the enveloping darkness of the forest. The woods that night were filled with the natural chorus of nocturnal creatures, yet beneath it all lay an eerie silence that seemed to press in on us from every side. Every rustle in the underbrush and every snap of a twig made my heart race. I strained my eyes to catch a glimpse of a figure among the trees, but all I saw were shifting silhouettes and the inky blackness that hid countless secrets. Rosie's grip tightened, and her whispered question hung in the air as we slowly made our way back to the tent. Even after returning to the relative safety of our shelter, the unsettling feeling persisted. Lying in the dark, I could still sense that elusive presence, as if unseen eyes were peering in through the shadows. The memory of that night, of those inexplicable silhouettes at the edge of the fire's light, has never left me. It serves as a constant reminder that sometimes the most unnerving specters are not those we can see clearly, but those that linger in the periphery of our vision, ever watchful, ever mysterious, and always just out of reach.